Look at a simple piece of bread. Maybe of some sitting on your kitchen counter right now, or maybe you can just picture it in your mind. A regular loaf of bread. It is quiet. It is safe. It is something you eat every day without thinking about it. But think about how bread is actually made. You take heavy flour, you take water, and you add something tiny. You add yeast. Yeast is a very small living thing. You cannot see it working. But once you mix it into the dough, it changes everything. It moves through the heavy flour in the dark. It stretches the dough. It transforms a flat, hard block into something soft and alive. It disrupts the original shape completely. We forget about the yeast. We only see the final loaf of bread on the table. We do the exact same thing with history. We do the exact same thing with the ancient stories of Jesus. We call these stories parables. You have probably heard them before. Even if you did not grow up in a strict religious home, you know them. The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, the mustard seed. We see them everywhere. They are printed in colorful children's books. They are painted on beautiful glass windows. They are spoken in quiet, peaceful rooms on Sunday mornings. We are told they are simple moral lessons. Be a good neighbor. Forgive your family. Have a little bit of faith. They sound nice. They sound harmless. They sound completely safe. But here is a truth that might surprise you. If you feel bored when you hear these stories, it is not your fault. If you read these ancient words and feel absolutely nothing, do not blame yourself. You might sit there and think about what is wrong with you. Why do you not feel inspired? Why do these famous stories feel like dry, dusty museum pieces? You might feel guilty. You might think you lack faith. You might think you are just too tired or too distracted by the modern world to understand them. You think you are the problem. You are not the problem. Your boredom is not a failure of your own heart. It is the invisible drift of time. It is the heavy blanket of history that has covered the sharp edges of these stories. Over 2,000 years, society took something dangerous and made it safe. They took a wildfire and put it inside a tiny glass lamp. They took stories meant to shake the earth and turned them into gentle advice for good behavior. Let me be very clear. The parables of Jesus were never meant to be sweet bedtime stories. They were not simple moral lessons to help you be a nicer person. They were radical. They were dangerous. They were deeply political. They were designed to dismantle the status quo, which means they were built to completely change how power worked. They were carefully crafted bombs, wrapped in everyday language, thrown into a world of intense power and deep inequality. Think about the world Jesus lived in. It was not a peaceful place. It was a world crushed by the powerful Roman Empire. The military was everywhere. Taxes were incredibly high. Most regular people were very poor. They worked hard from sunrise to sunset just to survive another day. The religious leaders held strict control over the rules of daily life. The rich and powerful lived in extreme luxury, while the poor were pushed to the edges of society. If you spoke out against this system, you were silenced. Often, you were killed. The empire did not tolerate any kind of rebellion. So, how do you spread a message of complete revolution in a world where you cannot speak freely? How do you tell the poor that the current system is totally broken? How do you tell the powerful that their time is running out? You do not give a direct speech. If you give a direct speech, the soldiers will arrest you. You do not write a political document. If you write a political document, it will be burned. Instead, you tell a story. You talk about farmers. You talk about seeds. You talk about lost coins and wandering sheep. You talk about regular people doing regular things. To the Roman soldiers listening on the edge of the crowd, it sounded like a simple lesson about agriculture. It sounded harmless. But to the poor farmers, to the outcasts, to the oppressed people listening closely, it was a completely different language. They heard the hidden message. They understood the secret code. They realized that the story was not about farming at all. It was about a new kind of kingdom. A kingdom that did not rely on swords or taxes or harsh rules. The parables were a clever trick. They invited the listener into a familiar scene. The listener would relax. The listener would agree with the story. And then, at the very end, Jesus would twist the story. He would introduce something shocking, something that broke all the rules of their culture. The hero of the story would be the hated enemy. The foolish choice would turn out to be the wise choice. The smallest, most annoying weed would become the biggest tree. This twist forced the listener to wake up. It forced them to question everything they knew about power, money, and religion. It was a psychological puzzle designed to break their old ways of thinking. We have lost that shock today. We have heard the stories so many times that we know the ending before it begins. We do not feel the scandal. We do not feel the danger. We just hear a nice moral lesson. We have taken the yeast out of the bread. We are eating something flat and heavy and wondering why it does not taste alive. But today, we are going to put the yeast back in. We are going to travel back to the dusty roads of the ancient Middle East. We are going to look past the beautiful stained glass windows and see the dirt, the sweat, and the political tension of the first century. We are going to strip away 2,000 years of safe, polite religion. We are going to listen to these parables the way the very first crowds heard them. When we do this, everything changes completely. The familiar stories will feel completely new. You will see the hidden subversion. You will see how Jesus used simple words to quietly take apart the greatest empire in the world. And more importantly, you will see how these ancient stories are speaking directly to the broken systems of our modern world today. They are speaking to the stress in your own life. They are speaking to the power struggles happening right now. They are not dead words from the past. They are a living, breathing challenge for today. You do not need to feel guilty anymore. You just need to listen differently. You just need to recognize the radical nature of the seed being planted. Let us break the surface. Let us look at the deep roots. Let us see how deep this actually goes. Let us look very closely at the word parable itself. We use this word all the time, but we have completely forgotten what it actually means. In our modern minds, a parable is a soft thing. It is a fairy tale. It is a harmless myth. It is a story meant to make children fall asleep peacefully. But let us do some word surgery today. Let us cut open the English word and look at its ancient bones. Let us see the hidden treasure buried inside the language. The word parable comes from an old Greek word, parabole. It is made of two smaller pieces. The first piece is para. This means beside. Think of parallel lines running right next to each other. The second piece is baleen. This means to throw, to cast something forward with sudden physical force. So, a parable is not a gentle story at all. It literally means to throw one thing down right next to another thing. Why would you do that? You do it so the listener is forced to look at the sharp difference between them. It is an act of deliberate collision. You take a new, strange, dangerous idea, and you throw it right next to a very old, familiar, safe reality. Jesus was not painting pretty pictures with his words. He was throwing heavy stones into still water. He was taking a completely radical idea of power and throwing it right next to the brutal Roman idea of power. The violent crash of those two ideas is the true parable. It is highly active. It is aggressive. It is a thrown object meant to break old systems. A parable is not a soft pillow for you to rest your tired head on. It is a loud alarm clock ringing right next to your ear in the dark. It is not a gentle candle showing you a safe path through the dark woods. It is a sudden, blinding flash of lightning that reveals you are standing on the very edge of a high cliff. It wakes you up. It startles you. It makes your heart race. It shows you the danger you are in. Now let us look at another word. Let us look at subversion. We talk about the hidden subversion of these ancient stories. Today, when people hear the word subvert, they immediately think of violent revolution. They think of angry armies marching in the city streets. They think of weapons and fire and loud noise. But let us examine the Latin roots of this word. Sub means under. It means from below. Think of a submarine moving silently deep underwater. Vertere means to turn, to change direction entirely. Therefore, to subvert does not mean to smash a political system from the top down. It means to quietly turn something over from underneath. It happens entirely out of sight. It happens while the powerful people are sleeping in their beds. Subversion is not a heavy steel hammer smashing a thick stone wall into broken pieces. It is the slow, quiet water dripping into a tiny crack in that wall. The water sits there quietly. Then the winter comes. The water freezes. It naturally expands. And the massive stone silently breaks open from the inside out. Subversion is the tiny, soft roots of a tree growing under a heavy concrete city sidewalk. You do not notice the green roots for many years. You walk right over them every single day. But one day, the thick, heavy concrete cracks and lifts. The quiet life growing underneath has defeated the dead stone resting on top. That is true subversion. To turn from below. This is exactly what the carpenter from Nazareth was doing. The Roman Empire loved the heavy hammer. They smashed people from the top down. They used pure physical force to control the world. Jesus used the water and the roots. He worked entirely from the bottom up. He never told his followers to grab physical swords and attack the Roman governors. That is top-down force. That is the hammer. Instead, he told them stories about the very bottom of society. He talked about tiny mustard seeds growing wildly and taking over gardens. He talked about poor women baking bread in their kitchens. He talked about low-class shepherds losing their sheep in the dangerous wilderness. He was turning the entire social order upside down, slowly, from underneath the ground. Imagine you have a beautiful, expensive rug in your living room. The Roman Empire was like a giant, heavy table sitting directly on that rug. It crushed everything beneath its wooden legs. Jesus did not try to lift the heavy table. He did not attack the wood. He simply grabbed the edge of the rug and gave it a sharp, sudden pull. He pulled the ground out from under the entire system. When the rug moved, the table fell over on its own. The parables were the pulling of the rug. When he told a story about a rich farm owner who paid the workers who worked only 1 hour the exact same money as the exhausted workers who worked 12 hours in the hot sun, he was throwing a new idea. He was throwing it right next to the strict Roman idea of economics. The Romans believed you earned your human worth. You worked hard, you gained status, you proved your value to society. But Jesus took the wild concept of free grace and threw it right next to the strict concept of merit. The collision was deeply offensive. It made the hard workers very angry. It made the religious experts furious. But that meant the parable was working perfectly. The alarm clock was ringing. The heavy stone was thrown into the quiet water. The ripples were spreading out and hitting the shores of the empire. So when we read these ancient stories today, we must look closely for the throw. We must ask ourselves what two completely different things are crashing together in this sentence. What old, heavy concrete rule is being cracked open by this quiet, green root? We cannot treat these words like fragile glass vases resting safely in a quiet museum. They are heavy tools. They are digging tools meant to turn the hard soil of our minds completely over from underneath. They are meant to throw our comfortable lives into the bright light. The parables always force the listener to make a choice. They draw a clear line in the sand. They show us two completely different ways to live in the world. They show us two different kinds of power. To understand how radical this is, we need to look at two true stories from that ancient time. We need to see what happens when the hidden truth of the parables becomes real life. First, let us talk about the men who had absolutely everything. Look at the religious leaders and the high priests living in the ancient city of Jerusalem. They were the ultimate elite class. They possessed incredible wealth. They controlled the great temple. This was not a small, quiet church. It was a massive mountain of bright white stone and shining gold. It was one of the most beautiful and intimidating buildings in the whole world. These leaders had deep historical traditions to lean on. They knew every ancient law perfectly. They possessed absolute authority over the regular people. They had clever political deals with the dangerous Roman governors. By every human measure, they were totally successful. But they had a completely closed mindset. They viewed the kingdom of God as a private country club. You had to follow hundreds of strict rules to enter. You had to wash your hands the exact right way. You had to eat the exact right food. You had to have the correct family history. If you made one mistake, you were thrown out into the cold. They built massive social walls to keep the bad, dirty people away from the holy things. They thought their strict rules and heavy stone walls would protect them forever. They thought they were incredibly strong, but they failed entirely. When the real pressure came from the Roman army a few decades later, their rigid system could not bend. It shattered. Because they refused to change, because they refused to listen to the warning of the parables, they lost absolutely everything. The great stone temple was completely destroyed by fire. Not one stone was left on top of another. They lost their power, their beautiful building, and their entire nation. They died defending a dead system. They were so busy protecting the ancient rules that they could not see the living truth standing in front of them. Their massive stone walls became their own dark prison. They had the whole world, but their rigid mindset destroyed them from the inside out. Now let us look at the complete opposite side of the road. Let us look at the people who had absolutely nothing. Look at the very first followers who actually listened to the parables and understood the secret code. These were not famous kings. These were not rich scholars. They were rough fishermen who smelled like salt and sweat. They were hated tax collectors working for the enemy. They were sick people living on the dirty, dusty streets. They were poor women who had zero legal voice in their own society. They possessed no political power at all. They had no gold coins hidden away. They had no beautiful stone buildings to gather in. They did not even have physical weapons to fight the Roman soldiers. They were at the very bottom of the brutal ancient world, but they possessed the right mindset. They accepted the quiet mindset of the tiny mustard seed. They understood that true power does not start at the top of a golden throne. It starts down in the dirt. It starts in the dark, messy soil of everyday human life. They stopped trying to control other people. Instead, they began to serve them. They learned to share their simple food. They learned to treat the sick outcasts as equal brothers and sisters. They met in secret inside small, dark homes. They whispered the dangerous stories of the parables across rough wooden tables while breaking their daily bread. When the Roman Empire tried to crush them, they did not fight back with heavy steel swords. You cannot crush yeast with a heavy hammer. A hammer only spreads the yeast further and deeper into the dough. Because they had no heavy buildings to protect, they could move anywhere. Because they had no rigid rules of perfection, they could invite anyone to join their new family. Their movement survived the Roman fires. It survived the wild lions in the arena. It survived extreme poverty. They had absolutely nothing, but they ended up conquering the heart of the greatest empire on earth. They won because their minds were entirely open to the upside-down reality the parables described. Why did the poor fishermen succeed while the powerful priests failed? We often think that suffering and weakness are terrible punishments. We think that if we lose our power, or if we are pushed down to the bottom, we have done something terribly wrong. The rich men in the great temple thought their shining gold was a direct reward from heaven. They thought the poor fishermen were being punished for their hidden sins. But the parables reveal a completely different truth. The parables show us the concept of the corridor. Imagine a long, dark hallway in a large house. It is narrow. It is highly uncomfortable. You cannot stay there forever. But you must walk all the way through it to get to the bright, warm room on the other side. The struggle of those poor people was not a punishment. It was a necessary corridor. The loss of personal power is not a failure. It is the dark, narrow hallway of deep transformation. When Jesus told the famous story of the lost son who ran away and ended up feeding pigs in the dirt, he was describing this exact hallway. The young son had to lose all his proud money. He had to experience deep, painful hunger. He had to hit the absolute bottom. The dirty pig pen was his dark corridor. If he had never lost his wealth, his hard heart would never have changed. He would have remained a spoiled, arrogant child for his entire life. The deep pain broke his false pride. The darkness forced his tired eyes to adjust and finally see the truth about his father and his home. The struggle stripped away his massive ego. When you walk through the corridor of letting go of your control, you will feel empty. You will feel like you are failing the test. You will feel like you are losing the big game of life. But the parables promise us that this emptiness is strictly required. You cannot fill a cup that is already full of dirty water. You must empty the glass completely first. The dark corridor is the exact place where your cup is poured out. It is the only way to reach the great feast waiting for you in the bright room ahead. The corridor of the ancient world is the exact same corridor you are standing in today. You do not live in the ancient Roman Empire. You do not see soldiers with spears on your street. But you feel the heavy weight of our modern world. It is a world that demands absolute perfection. It demands constant work, constant money, and constant success. It is a loud, aggressive machine. Sometimes you feel like a tiny piece of grass trapped under a massive stone wheel. Think about your own life right now. Bring your mind to a very specific place. Think about the heavy quiet of your house at 2 in the morning. You are sitting alone at the kitchen counter. The world outside the window is completely dark. The street is silent. Everyone else is sleeping safely in their warm beds. But your eyes are wide open. Your mind is racing in circles. You are holding a cold cup of water. You are staring at a blank wall or looking at the glowing screen of your phone. You feel incredibly tired. Your bones ache with exhaustion, but your brain cannot rest. You are carrying a massive weight on your shoulders. Maybe it is your job. You work hard every single day. You give all your energy away, but you never seem to get ahead. The rent goes up. The bills keep coming. The pressure keeps building until you can barely breathe. Maybe it is a broken relationship. You gave your whole heart to someone you trusted. You built a life with them. Then it fell apart. Now you are alone, trying to pick up the tiny, sharp pieces of your broken trust. Or maybe it is a deep sense of waiting. You have a dream for your life. You have been planting good seeds for many years. You have been patient. You have been kind. You have done the right things. But absolutely nothing is growing. The dirt looks completely dead. You look around at other people. They seem incredibly successful. They have the nice cars. They have the loud, happy vacations. They seem to have the golden temple and the perfect, easy life. In those quiet moments at the kitchen counter, a cold voice speaks inside your mind. The voice tells you that you are losing the game. The voice tells you that you are too small, too weak, and simply too late. It tells you that your quiet efforts do not matter at all. It tells you that the loud, aggressive world will always crush gentle people like you. It tells you that your cup is empty because you did something terribly wrong. It tells you that you are forgotten. I want you to stop listening to that cold voice. I want you to remember the ancient secret of the parables. I want you to hear the quiet truth that has survived for 2,000 years. You are not failing. You are not broken. You are simply walking through the dark, narrow hallway of transformation. You are exactly where the deep, slow work happens. Remember the tiny mustard seed from the ancient story. It does not grow by making a loud noise. It does not fight the heavy dirt resting on top of it. It simply waits. It gathers quiet energy in the absolute dark. It allows its hard outer shell to crack open. Breaking open is terrifying. It hurts. It feels exactly like total destruction. But it is not destruction. It is the necessary birth of a completely new life. The breaking of the shell is strictly required for the green roots to escape. I know the waiting is deeply painful. I know the silence of the long night feels incredibly heavy. The ancient stories know this pain too. Jesus did not tell stories about magical kings who never cried. He told stories about exhausted farmers trying to grow wheat in terrible soil. He told stories about poor, lonely women crying out for justice. He looked directly at the painful reality of regular human life. He looked directly at people who felt exactly like you do right now. When you feel small and forgotten, the parables whisper a radical promise to you. They tell you that the kingdom of real peace does not belong to the loud billionaires. It does not belong to the angry politician shouting on television. It does not belong to the arrogant people who crush others to get to the top. The true kingdom belongs to the quiet ones. It belongs to the gentle ones. It belongs to the exhausted people crying quietly at the kitchen counter at 2 in the morning. Your tears are not a sign of weakness. Your exhaustion is not a permanent defeat. They are the soft water hitting the hard stone wall of your old life. They are the tiny roots growing under the heavy concrete of your fear. You are pulling the rug out from under your own anxiety. It is a slow, quiet subversion of your own pain. You are turning your life over from underneath. You cannot see the yeast working inside the heavy dough. The dough just looks like a dead, flat lump lying on the table. But deep inside, everything is changing. The yeast is moving in the dark. It is creating empty space. It is creating breath. The transformation is entirely invisible until the very end. Your life is exactly like that dough. Right now, in the dark, you feel trapped and flat. But the quiet power of hope is secretly working inside you. It is stretching your tired heart. It is expanding your capacity to love and to finally forgive. The loud empire of modern success wants you to feel entirely worthless. It wants you to measure your short life by money, status, and noise. But the quiet carpenter invites you to completely ignore that false system. He invites you to embrace your smallness. He invites you to see your current struggle not as a dead end, but as a secret living garden. The seed has already been planted. The winter is almost over. The silent subversion is already happening inside your chest. You just have to hold on through the dark night and trust the slow roots. The long night at the quiet kitchen counter will eventually end. The sun will finally come up over the roof of your house. The dark shadows in your room will slowly fade into soft morning light. This is the natural order of the world. While you were awake worrying about your heavy problems, the invisible yeast was quietly finishing its deep work inside the dough. The waiting is almost over. The fresh bread is finally ready to face the intense heat of the oven. You survived the long, silent hours of the dark corridor. You are still breathing. That single breath moving in and out of your tired chest is a massive victory. It is the very first sign of the tiny green root cracking the hard concrete of your fear. You are still here, but the morning brings a new kind of danger. When the sun rises, the loud modern world immediately tries to grab your attention again. The glowing phone on your table will start to ring. The television will shout angry news from distant cities. The brutal empire of success will demand your immediate panic. The world wants you to grab the heavy steel hammer again. It wants you to rush out the front door and start smashing your way to the top. It wants you to forget the quiet, profound truth you discovered in the dark kitchen. It wants you to feel deeply guilty for resting. It wants you to feel weak. You must resist this loud noise completely. You must protect the quiet, fragile seed we planted today. How do we actually protect the seed in a very loud world? We do not fight the noise with more aggressive noise. We do not try to build a massive stone wall to hide behind. That is the old Roman way of power. Instead, we use the smallest possible action. Jesus used incredibly tiny things to completely change the massive world. He used a tiny lost coin. He used a small drop of cold water. He used a single grain of common wheat. True revolution does not start with a grand, impossible plan. It starts with one tiny physical movement that breaks your old pattern completely. It starts with a micro-action. I am going to ask you to do 3 incredibly small things tomorrow morning. Do not try to change your entire stressful life in one day. Do not try to fix every broken relationship or solve every money problem before breakfast. That is impossible. Just do these 3 tiny, frictionless things. Step 1 is very simple. Before you look at the bright screen of your phone, walk into your kitchen and find one small piece of bread. Just a tiny piece. Hold it firmly in your bare hand. Feel the real physical weight of it. Remind yourself that something totally invisible and quiet created this soft food. Remind yourself that the slow work of the yeast is exactly like the slow, hidden work happening inside your own exhausted heart right now. Step 2 requires a deliberate choice. Carry that small piece of bread to a quiet chair. Do not sit on your bed. Choose a specific chair in your living room or next to a window. Sit down softly and set a simple timer for exactly 60 seconds. 1 single minute. Close your tired eyes. Do not pray a long, perfect religious prayer. Do not make a massive, stressful list of your personal failures. Just sit in the total, absolute silence. Let the loud empire scream outside your glass window. Let the cars rush by on the street. You are completely safe inside this 60 seconds of quiet time. You are stepping completely out of the brutal machine. You are resting peacefully in the narrow corridor. Step 3 is the final release. When the 60 seconds are officially over, open your eyes. Look at the empty room and speak one simple sentence out loud. You must use your physical voice. Say, I do not have to carry the heavy table today. Say it clearly so your physical ears hear the words. By speaking this sentence, you are officially putting the harsh Roman rules down on the floor. You are refusing to play the endless game of perfect success. You are accepting the wild, upside-down grace of the tiny seed. You are letting the hidden subversion begin its quiet work from underneath your daily stress. This is exactly how you change your mindset entirely. These 3 physical steps are incredibly tiny. They take almost no time out of your busy morning. They require absolutely no money. They require no special political power. But they act as your own personal parable. You are throwing a quiet, radical action right next to your busy, stressful reality. The sudden collision of those 2 things will completely wake you up. It will pull the heavy rug out from under your daily anxiety. It will permanently change the very first step you take out of your front door. This is where you finally become part of the living, breathing story. The ancient parables were never meant to be kept secret forever inside quiet museums. They were meant to be shared across rough wooden tables. They were meant to feed the hungry, exhausted people sitting alone in the dark. If you felt a sudden shift in your chest today, if you felt the heavy stone wall crack just a little bit, do not keep this deep freedom to yourself. There is someone in your daily life right now who is sitting at their own kitchen counter at 2 in the morning. They feel exactly like you did. They feel completely crushed by the empire. They feel totally forgotten. You can truly help them today. You can pass the soft bread across the dark table. Take a brief moment to support the quiet revolution we are building together here. Subscribe to Profoundly Simple. By joining our community, you actively help push these ancient radical ideas back into the loud modern world. Press the like button so the invisible digital system shares this exact message with a stranger who desperately needs deep comfort today. Share this story directly with that tired friend. Send it to them softly, like a small, mysterious seed in the mail. Tell them they are not failing the test of life. Tell them the dark corridor is perfectly safe. Tell them the hidden subversion of peace has already begun. You are no longer just a passive listener standing in the back of the ancient crowd. You are a true carrier of the living seed. You are the gentle water breaking the hard stone. You are the quiet roots pushing up the heavy concrete of the world. Trust the deep dirt entirely. Trust the slow, invisible process. Walk into your new morning with profound peace.